Good morning. Welcome into Let's Bet It here on Pickswise and Pickswise.com. I'm Mark Zinno, joined by Jared Smith. Welcome you guys into a Thursday edition of the show. Thursday night football to get to. We'll get to some props and prop holiday as well. We got some key games for week 3 in college football. Of course, our plays of the day. Make sure you guys subscribe to the Pickswise YouTube channel. Let us know in the comments below what you like, what you don't like, what plays you're on. We'll try to get to all the questions that you have before the end of the show. And make sure you download the Pickswise app, available on the Apple Store and on Google Play. Happy Thursday, Jared. Welcome. Good to talk to you as always.
Yeah, great to be on. Fun day. This is our first true, in my opinion, our first true Thursday night football game. Last Thursday, there was no real Sunday to Thursday handicap, which makes the Thursday night game so much more fascinating when you're handicapping that short week. So this is our first short week, and I think it's a very, arguably the two best teams in the league, right? I mean, Buffalo's up there too, but maybe the two best quarterbacks in the league besides Josh Allen. So fascinating matchup, divisional matchup. I know Bobby has some interesting props. I know you've got some angles. We got Clev TA chiming in too with a 3-star pick. So lots of good fodder to get you through this Thursday.
Well, with that, let's do it. Let's Bet It, presented by Superbook Sports. All right, Chargers and Chiefs. Kansas City -4, total of 54 in the game. Just some overall odds right now. AFC West, Chiefs +140, Chargers +170. On the Super Bowl, Chiefs 8-1, Chargers 13-1. And, of course, your MVP odds, Patrick Mahomes 5-1 and Herbert 7-1. So, look, Mahomes, who already has an MVP in his back pocket, probably going to be the leading candidate coming out of week 1, now heading into week 2 for the MVP. Josh Allen, I assume, will be right there with him. But, Mahomes actually being less than the favorite here for the MVP seems like value.
I agree. I think Patty is at the stage of his career where he's done so much already. It is hard for him to elevate that, thinking, the level of thinking that the average voter and the average bettor has about him. But let's be honest, this Chiefs team is, I would say right now, and I don't want to take anything away from what we saw last Thursday with the Bills. But if you are asking me right now, I had to pick one offense in one game to win the big one, I think I would still take Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs just because of how inventive Andy Reid is and the elevation that I think Patrick can bring his game. Josh Allen is, again, fantastic. Definitely worthy of being an MVP favorite. But I would put a little more polish on Patty's game right now. So that would be the way I would lean in that direction.
Well, the only sample size we have for this year is week 1. And I would tell you that Kansas City smoking Arizona is more of an indictment on Arizona and their bad defense than necessarily the Rams having an off night with probably a little bit more focus on celebration than football. I still think the Rams are going to be very competitive and very good. I'm not sure the Cardinals will, especially given what they're dealing with at the beginning part of the season, missing offensively and defensively. So, we only have, again, one game sample size to figure it all out. So I don't know if we can draw too many conclusions at this point in time. But that said, there is a certain amount of trying to figure out who's better than really good at this point in time. It's almost a toss-up, right? So
they're both really good, and they're both worthy of being the MVP, right now. But you're right. One data point, we can't really, make any too many reasonable conclusions off of the one data point.
Yeah, I have a couple of props here for Thursday night that I'm looking at, a couple of picks that I'm likely going to get to the window on, including my play of the day. I'll save that for obviously the end of the show. But, I lean on the Chargers +4. The last 3 games in this series have all been one-score games. Patrick Mahomes only has 3 losses to the AFC West, 2 of them into the Chargers. This is always going to be a very close game. And if you're giving me 4 to get to, landing on 5 as a dead number, saying, okay, well then KC's going to win by 6 or more. I don't know. I think the Chargers are good enough to keep it close. Patrick Mahomes did a very good job last week of spreading the football around to a lot of different targets. Juju Smith-Schuster got a TD. Mecole Hardman got a TD. I'm going to go with MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, to find the end zone this week. Anytime touchdown, +210 is a fantastic number for him. I think they'll continue to spread the ball all the way around. And I do like Patrick Mahomes on 2 props. His completion prop over 26.5 and his pass attempts prop over 40.5. In fact, he's gone over both these numbers in the last 3 meetings against the Chargers. Expect it probably to be a little bit high scoring. That would lend to Mahomes throwing a lot more, completing a lot more. I think both of those are worthwhile plays. I know you have one for the play of the day. I don't know if you want to save it or you want to give it out now and redo it again at the end, but it's your
No, we'll save it. I'll give you some things that I'm looking at tonight, and I'll give you a couple of trends that I think are noteworthy. So the first trend, and again, Clef TA has been doing a fantastic job for us Thursday, Monday night analysis. He had a great week with his contest picks too. So certainly a good follow, and check out all of the things that he sends out every week here on Pickswise.com. He posted something about this, and I narrowed the trend a little bit to make it a little bit more hyper-focused than what we've seen the last couple of years. But teams coming off a blowout in week 1. And the way a blowout is defined in the NFL is 21 points or more. Obviously, Kansas City fits that mold. They're the only team that fits that mold this week. Just 2-9 against the number in week 2. And that's since 2017. And you can kind of understand why. It fits the narrative. Team explodes in week 1, over expectations, market moves, and then you have the regression in week 2. The irony is the opposite is not true for the teams that get blown out in week 1. They are actually about 500 against the spread, 1 game under, 19, 20, and 2 since 2005. However, last year they did go 2-1. Packers and Seahawks got blown out in week 1. They both bounced back nicely, covered the number in their following game. This week, of course, you mentioned it, the Cardinals, the only team that fits that narrative. That narrative does intrigue me because it fits what we talk about every week, buy low, sell high. So that being said, the Chargers against the spread, you would think, has a hair of value tonight, especially over that key number of 3. It might scare you what we're going to bet tonight with our play today. It ain't going to be fun. It's going to be sweaty, but I think there's some value to it. And again, I think we'll touch base on it a little later in the show when we get to our play today.
All right, some injury notes for tonight. Harrison Butker not going to play for the Chiefs. He's a kicker. Who cares? He's probably going to miss anyway, but that's a whole different conversation. My disdain
but that's
for
a big one, though, because he's a pretty good kicker. He's one of the better ones.
And that's another reason why to take the Chargers, I think, because a missed field goal could be the difference between 4 and 7.
Totally agree.
So that is kind of big. And Keenan Allen not going to play for the Chargers, nursing a hamstring injury. So that'll get targets going to other players. And those other players who might benefit from that will turn us to our guest for the day, Bobby Stanley, a.k.a. Prop Holiday, going to join us to give us his thoughts on Thursday Night Football, what game, what angles, what players, what props he is looking at for this Thursday night matchup between the Chargers and the Chiefs in KC. Welcome in. Prop Holiday. Give him a follow on Twitter at Prop Holiday, 2 L's, Holiday. Bobby, welcome. Good to talk to you as always.
2 L's tonight, Bobby. Hopefully all
2 L's. No, not 2 L's tonight. What up, fellas? Happy Thursday. We know we got a hell of a matchup to watch. How's everybody doing?
Doing well. Just mentioned that Keenan Allen will be out. So where will the ball go in his absence? Who's going to be the beneficiary of that from a pass catching standpoint? Are there any props that you're looking at that way?
Of course. No, I'm on Josh Palmer tonight. He is the de facto number 2 in this offense with Keenan Allen out. So this line is at 46.5. Opened up at 45.5. Saw it jump up to 49.5. Now it's pretty much settled at 46.5. Solo game last year without Keenan Allen in the lineup. He goes for 5 receptions, 66 yards, and a touchdown. So he's been in this spot, and he's succeeded with Allen gone. Last week, played 75% of the snaps, involved in run-blocking situations, greatly outsnapped DeAndre Carter and Jalen Guyton. So I do think he is really solidified as that number 2. And Mike Williams is going to get a lot of the attention. Can Mike Williams disappear in a game? I think he did a damn good job of that last week in week 1. So I'm looking at Palmer. And if we look how we finished the season last year, he had 6 targets, 5 targets, and 9 targets in that wide receiver 3 role. So Herbert's comfortable with him. I really like Palmer tonight. If you're feeling frisky, you can find a couple alt lines out there, depending what your book offers, and you can get him at 50-plus yards, 60-plus yards, and get that plus odds value. But I'm going to stay safe and comfortable at 46.5.
One of the things I noticed when I was digging into this Chargers-Raiders box score, Derek Carr's numbers were very pedestrian. And maybe you want to blame that on the offensive line. Maybe you want to blame that on first game, new weapons, whatever. But I would argue that Brandon Staley's defense maybe is turned a corner after the disaster of last year. Now we get a much different animal this week with this defense. And the question, anytime you're handicapping props, Bobby, is what is the defensive scheme against this Kansas City offense, and how is that going to affect the prop market? What have you seen when you've handicapped the Chargers defense this week, and what do you expect Kansas City to do to attack what, again, I think is a very plus Chargers unit? We just didn't see the results last year. Maybe the results will start to manifest themselves this year, but what does that mean for you in the prop market tonight?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head. They greatly improved the pass rush with adding Khalil Mack. We saw it pay dividends last week. The defensive scheme you mentioned, it's a cover 2. They play a soft zone. I think the way to attack that is with short and intermediate passes. So I take a look at last year. I look at the 2 matchups between the Chiefs and the Chargers. First matchup, Chargers win. I look at the depth of target and where is Mahomes throwing the ball last year. 61% of his passes were between the line of scrimmage and about 9 yards out. Now let's go to week 15. Chiefs win that matchup. 71% of his passes are now between line of scrimmage and 9 yards out. They picked up on that defense. You need to do a little bit of incremental plays, and you're not going to take the top off with Tyreek Hill. That was kind of the big knock on them last year. They kept going for the deep ball, never really came to fruition. Now Tyreek Hill's gone. They don't even have the option to lean on that. So I think you're looking at shorter passes. Mark, I heard you say Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He could be in for a big game tonight. Week 1, he was on the field more than any other wide receiver, same amount as Travis Kelce. Average depth of target was 5.5 yards, so he could be a guy that really explodes. But the other guy that I'm on for one of my plays is actually Jerick McKinnon, the second running back, if you will. Jerick McKinnon, his over-under yards, I got it at 16.5. So it opened at 15.5. Now it's up to 17.5. I think he's going to be very, very involved in this offense tonight. Played the same amount of snaps as Clyde Edwards-Helaire did in week 1. Outsnapped the rookie out of Rutgers, Pachenko, 26-17. So I think he should be on the field. And he went 4 for 4 in targets. If you look at kind of the Chargers, how'd they do against running backs last week against Las Vegas? They didn't really play a team with very good pass-catching running backs. They had Josh Jacobs, and they had Brandon Bolden, who's a New England vet at this point. Josh Jacobs, 1 reception, 16 yards. Brandon Bolden, 2 receptions for 21 yards. So when they were targeted, they were very successful. So I think that's going to translate to McKinnon tonight and potentially Valdez-Scantling.
Bobby, you look at this game as a high-scoring affair. I know the total is up there. All these offensive props, these teams can obviously shoot it out with the best of them. I mean, is there any chance that unders might be worth a look anywhere?
I looked at this, guys, and you can argue it both ways. So if you look at Thursday Night Football, when the total's at 50 or more, tonight it's at 54, they're 23-14-1 against the overs. That's 23-14-1 against the under. So 62% of Thursday Night Football games go under when it's at 15.5. All right, so I looked a little bit deeper, and I said, what does that mean for early in the season? Well, last season, the first 2 weeks, they went over, maybe because you're not really playing that short week as much. And then one of those, you're still fresh. So
that's short. Week 2 and week 3, bodies aren't as beat up as they are in October and November.
Exactly. You can argue it both ways. I would generally lean under at 54. But if we look at the week 15 Thursday Night Football matchup against the Chiefs and Chargers, they blew it out of the water. So, I mean, it's a coin flip either way. I do want to throw this out there. Travis Kelce, when Derwin James is on the field, 22 snaps, 1 catch, 14 yards. Travis Kelce, when Derwin James is not on the field, 30 snaps, 9 catches, 177 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
That seems
Derwin James is going to be on. That's pretty substantial. Travis Kelce is the heart of this offense from a pass catching standpoint. 97% of the bets are on over 76.5 yards for Kelce tonight. I would fade that. I would stay away from Travis Kelce if Derwin James is going to be on him, and I think he is. And Jared, as you pointed out, this defense looks night and day different. You add a pass rush, you get a healthy Derwin James. We could be seeing some unders. We could see a down night for Kelce.
I mean, I'm looking at the advanced box score from the Raiders game. To me, is fascinating. Vegas had a 39% success rate on early down passing plays. Like, that shouldn't happen when Derek Carr has all these great weapons. Darren Waller had a 0, didn't add any expected points in the game. He was only really targeted 6 times. So you want to talk about, again, Darren Waller to Travis Kelce. I see a lot of similarities there. So there's a case to be made for the Chargers defense handling their business tonight in a very intense divisional game off a short week. The first short week tonight really is the first Thursday night game, in my opinion. The short weeks are very, very hard to predict. They usually are volatile in one direction or the other. It's either way under or way over in terms of points and output. I would lean to the under tonight, and we'll get into the way I'm attacking it a little later. Yeah. But there are some things that with this Chargers defense that I really like. And I think, as Mark pointed out at the top of the show, the Chiefs' output on Monday night or on Sunday was a lot of Arizona bad and not as much Kansas City good. So I think unders might be the way to fly tonight if you're really going to spread your wings in the prop market and the totals market.
Well, I do agree. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish up.
I agree with you, Jared. I agree on the under. I do think 54 is a little bit high. Now what we know about Travis Kelce. But there could be some good spots in the running game. We're looking at the best run blocking graded offensive line in the Chargers. In the Chiefs. The Chargers ranked 27th in rush defense last week. So we can see guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jerick McKinnon really make an impact on the ground in short yard passing. Those could be over situations. But what does that mean for the game? Well, if you're chewing up the clock on the ground, you're leaning more towards an under. We have a backup kicker standing, a practice squad kicker. Does that mean now you're going for 2 more? We can see some weird
probably and not kicking as many field goals. I think the kicker thing actually really helps the under a lot because you go for it. You don't take those easy points when you can. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reaching here.
If you notice, Jared, I have no kicker prop this week. It's for good reason.
Thank God you bailed on that after 1 week.
It's gonna hit.
We gotta get you off those, bud. You're such a good handicapper that the kicker props are so fluky. They're so fluky. These guys go for 2. They screw up in the red zone. The kickers stay away from the kickers. The kickers have been ruining these games.
I have a lot to learn from you, man, and I will start there.
No, stop it. It's just the kickers. The kickers need to be put on a rocket ship and sent to Mars.
But yeah,
well, make sure you guys give him a follow. Give him a follow on Twitter at Prop Holiday with 2 L's in Holiday. No L's for you tonight, though. But real quick before we let you go, you did give us 4 plays: Jerick McKinnon, Josh Palmer, Marcus Valdez-Scantling, Jerick McKinnon for an anytime TD. You got a favorite one out of all those you want to give the audience?
I'm with you, man. I'm with Valdez-Scantling. I think we see a big game at him. Plus 210 is awesome value.
It's a nice price.
He's their wide receiver too. Now what we know about Kelce. McKinnon odds went down greatly. He was opened at plus 440. Now he's like plus 305. I think we're going to see him heavily involved in this offense tonight. So 2 guys I got my eye on for touchdowns.
All right, again, Prop Holiday. Bobby Stanley, always great to talk to you, brother. Enjoy the rest of the week and the college football Saturday and the NFL Sunday. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, fellas. Have a good one. Good luck.
All right. Again, Bobby Stanley at Prop Holiday on Twitter. All right, let's pivot here from Thursday Night Football to Saturday as we got some major, big-time college matchups to get to here, Jared, as – 2 of them, 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 Teams in a state of turmoil will lead us off, particularly A&M, Texas A&M, after their loss to App State at home. They welcome in the Miami Hurricanes in an ACC-SEC matchup here. The Aggies laying 5.5. There are some fives out there as well, I think, if you shop around. And one of the lowest totals on the board this weekend of 44.5. I got it at 45 and a couple of other places as well. Your feeling on this game?
So, two underachieving teams based off of what we saw in the prior 2 weeks. Obviously, A&M coming off of just a horrific loss. I think if I had to pick a side here, I would lean towards A&M. And it's not anything analytical or any, takes that I'm seeing based off of the metrics and the box scores. I just think they're a better football team. And I think when you look at motivation and the recruiting element, from what we hear, it is a massive recruiting weekend for Jimbo Fisher. He's going to have a lot of the big boys in town on the field watching the game. And I just kind of get the vibe that they're going to play a really good game. Again, they haven't played a ton of good football so far, so I don't have a lot of data to back this up. But there are some inklings. The Miami quarterback might be a little bit balky on the road, and they've played some pretty easy opponents so far. And I like the fact that this game is in College Station. And I think A&M wins. Do they cover? Probably. But I would be surprised if they dropped it after what we saw last week against them.
Well, it certainly feels like a must-win game. By the way, this game and all the games we're going to go over right now are up on the Pickswise.com website. I did my write-ups for them, and they are posted and live, so you can check it out there at Pickswise.com. I'm back in Miami in this spot, mostly because you're looking at an A&M offense right now that is completely ineffective. Last week, Haynes King, 13 of 20 for just 97 yards. The Aggies aren't even averaging 100 rushing yards on the ground. Leading rusher Devin Shane just run for just 108 yards, averaging 3.9 yards a carry. Miami's defense has been good against the run. Granted, it's been against two cupcakes, but still only allowing 63 yards per game on the ground. And they may be ready to make a change at quarterback. I mentioned Haynes King. Could it be Max Johnson, former LSU quarterback, waiting in the wings to get the call? Miami's offense has the third best passing attack in the nation, 381 yards per game. You get Tyler Van Dyke, who has reinvigorated that offense. Henry Parrish, the running back, averaging nearly 6 yards a carry. And it's put up 243 yards per game on the ground, has the Miami offense. So, it's the first real test for both of these Power 5 opponents. Could I see A&M winning this thing? Probably, maybe. If they do, it's by a field goal. I'm going to take the Canes here and the points in this matchup here that kicks off in the evening. Get a late start, 9 p.m. Eastern, rather, in College Station. All right, Jared, your boys traveling down south, Penn State coming to Auburn. The line is 3. Look, I know there may be some 3.5s out there. I've seen more 3s now than anything, in a total of 48, some places 47.5. I'll go first since I'm going to be shorter about this, okay? Last year, Penn State wins the game 28-20 in Happy Valley, and you could argue in certain cases maybe they got a little bit lucky. But they have the better quarterback in Sean Clifford, at least the more experienced quarterback. 5 touchdowns through his first 2 games, and he's put up just under 500 yards passing in the first 2 games. Looks like Penn State's starting to develop a little bit of the running game, which they needed last year. Nicholas Singleton had a huge game against Ohio. Not so good in the season opener against Purdue, but he's going to see a tough run against the Auburn Tigers, allowed just 64 yards per game rushing against opponent. Here's the thing. The Tigers have a -4 differential through 2 games, turnover differential through 2 games against 2 bad teams. Like, they didn't play high-level competition. TJ Finley, I don't think he's the answer at quarterback. He's got 3 picks already. That's going to be a problem against a Penn State defense and a really good linebacking core for Penn State. That I know crazy things happen at Jordan-Hare, but Auburn's offense doesn't impress me enough to back them even with the points here. Penn State's the better team. As long as they don't make a lot of mistakes, I can lay the 3 with the Nittany Lions in Auburn.
Yeah, I don't mind it. The nerd numbers are not favorable really to either team, so I don't have any edges for you there. I do think the Penn State offensive line is playing a little bit better on paper than I expected, which is great because, again, I think that was a unit that I was very concerned with this year. the right tackle especially, I forget it's either the right tackle or the left tackle. One of the tackles is grading out as like one of the best in the country this year. And that's very positive because Penn State's offensive line has not had a lot of success, especially, again, those analytics that we like to look at over the last few years. And, Singleton's a big, beneficiary of that. He was fantastic against Ohio. So let's keep that in perspective as well. I would be surprised if Penn State lost this game because I don't trust Auburn as far as I can throw them. But there's just something about this line that tells me it might be on point, and this might be a really close, low-scoring defensive game. And I don't really like to be on a 3 when I feel like that's going to happen. So I probably wouldn't lay the points in this spot. Maybe that's a little bit of my Penn State bias talking. But I think Penn State's in a good spot here. I think they feel like they've taken some positive steps going on the road, winning at Purdue week 1, coming back, taking care of business against Ohio, covering the spread, looking good in doing so. So definitely above expectations for Penn State so far. But again, this will be the best defense that they've played. This will be the best collection of talent that they have played thus far. So the organization of said talent against Auburn. But I do think on the road, this is going to be a tough environment. So we'll see if they can handle their business. And I think the line is right at 3.
I'll add this. I do like the under in this game. Open at 49.5 has come down. And I know key numbers aren't as big of a thing in college as they are in the NFL. But at 47.5 or 48, I'm a lot happier. I could see this game ending 27-20. Last year was 28-20. These aren't offenses that do a lot of crazy things. So traditional scoring may be more apt, whereas, they drive down the field, settle for a field goal. They get good field position off a bad punt or whatever, and they're able to punch one in. I don't think you'll see a lot of crazy scoring out of either one of these teams. It'll look a lot more traditional. So I would get the best number I can. If I get to 47, I'd probably walk away from the under, or anything under that. At 46.5, I would just pass on it, but I think the under is a pretty strong play.
I will say this, 48 is a relatively key total in college football. It's about almost 3% of games over the last 5 years have landed 48. It's the 4th most landed on total in that stretch. So my guess is it will gravitate around that magnet of 48, and it won't sink too much lower than that. Just my thought there. 47.5, my guess is that's probably at the low point, if I had to guess.
And then finally, Oregon and BYU, a matchup of top 25 teams here as BYU comes in off the big win over Baylor. Oregon, after getting smoked in week 1 by Georgia, bounces back with a 70-burger against Eastern Washington. Line at 3.5, total set at 58. Jared, please do the honors.
I'll be honest. This is a good spot for Oregon. It really is. BYU threw the kitchen sink at Baylor on Saturday night. They were without their 2 best wide receivers. You credit Jaron Hall. I forget how to. What's his first name? Jaron or Jalen? Jaron, I think.
Jaron
right?
Hall.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Jaron Hall. Thank you. He was fantastic. And I mean, goodness gracious, they had a freshman receiver, Chase Roberts, that I was listening to one of Brad Powers' appearances this week, college football handicapper. Even he hadn't heard of Chase Roberts. And this guy knows like every player on every FCS team. So for a guy like that to go for a $122 against the Baylor defense, and oh, by the way, throw a touchdown pass on like one of those gadget plays, BYU really emptied the tank to get that win against Baylor. I think this is going to be a much more difficult ask to go to Autzen and to operate an offense that has put all of these gadgets and gizmos now on tape last week to beat Baylor. Now you have to do it on the road in a hostile environment against the quarterback and an offense. Bo Nix, say what you want. At home, his road splits have been terrible. At home, he's been fantastic. And I know he's only played 1 game at Autzen Stadium, but the handicap still applies. You're at home, easier to operate, more comfortable surroundings, et cetera, et cetera. This line, despite the fact that Oregon got their doors blown off week 1, they played well last week against Eastern Washington. Let's call it what it is. Despite that narrative, BYU beating Baylor, we haven't seen any movement towards BYU on this line. It stayed at 3.5. Market analysis tells me Oregon's the right side. You can tell me why I'm right or wrong there, but I think Oregon's a bet for me at 3.5.
Oregon is my best bet of the week on Pickswise and Pickswise.com. And I'm going to back the Ducks here for a variety of reasons. One, narratives and recency bias sometimes drive lines and create value. And that's what I think we're seeing here when it comes to BYU. Much similar to what we watched with Florida in week one in their win over Utah. If you get a pass interference call like you should have gotten in week one in Florida, Utah, or they complete that pass and Utah wins that game, Florida is not installed as a 6-point favorite against Kentucky the following week. It might be 3.5, somewhere in that range, but they're getting extra value because of a win over team based off of one real generic play that swung it in a different direction. The same applies here with an overtime game against Baylor. As Jared just mentioned, they did have to throw a lot at them and expend a ton of emotional and physical energy to win that game in Provo of all places, which is a much different environment than going on the road to Eugene, Oregon. So there is that. But as you said, they had the home field advantage and they had the benefit of double overtime to get a chance to win a game that they easily could have lost. Because if Baylor wins that game, this look-ahead line that was sitting at 6 or 6.5 a couple of months ago is still right at that number, I believe, where it is right now. So I think you get some value with Oregon here on a shorter number. But Oregon is not as bad as what we saw against Georgia. They're a really
Definitely
good
not.
team. They won't have a bad season. They have one of the best defensive players in the country in Noah Sewell, and they have a very good defense that's going to be a lot more physical. That's what Dan Lanning was brought to Oregon to do.
Yeah.
Make this team more physical, be able to run the ball continually well, and be able to smack other teams around. So I look at this spot here for Oregon. I know they're the more talented team. I feel confident in their quarterback play. Bo Nix is the real wild card here because he has to limit his mistakes. If he doesn't make them, and as you said, he's much better at home, but he's been a mixed bag his entire career and how well he's going to play. He's had some really great games and some really big stinkers. I don't want to call this a letdown spot for the Cougars, but with them having to expend so much emotional energy last week, Oregon, to me, looks like a team that's a little bit undervalued after getting smoked in week one, and you ignore the 70 burger they put up last week against Eastern Washington because that doesn't really count. This is a real test. And here's the other thing for Oregon, which is super important to point out, and don't think Dan Lanning doesn't know this. After this game, they have a really very, very favorable stretch until they go play Utah again after losing twice to them last year. They might not, if they win this game, they might not lose again until they face Utah. They are favored in every game. Their road schedule is very easy the rest of the way out, but they need to win this game to be able to build that momentum to make an argument for the college football playoff, or at least beating Utah down the road would put them in that position to do so. So from that standpoint, if their only loss this year is to the number one team in the nation and they're the Pac-12 champ, yeah, they're going to go to the college football playoff. So need to win this game. It's their season on the line. I love them here. Like the over too. I'm sorry, the under rather, not the over. Even though the trend goes to the over in Eugene, I think this will be more of a defensive matchup than anything else. But give me Oregon -3.5.
I'll add a couple of things to back up your handicap here. First of all, you're 100% spot on about Oregon's schedule. Their road games are at Washington State, at Arizona, at Cal, at Colorado. And then, of course, they face the game against Oregon State later in the year after that Utah game. We'll know a lot more. So there is no excuse for Oregon not to run the table. Their home game, Stanford, UCLA, Washington. That Washington game will be fascinating. We'll keep an eye on that. Kalen DeBoer, we'll get into that later in the week. I think has got something cooking there with the Huskies. But you're 100% spot on. This is the last true test for Oregon until they run that Pac-12 gauntlet. I'll give you some key number data, too, in college football. And this is something I think about because obviously 3 is the number. But in the NFL, 3 matters a lot more than 3 than in college football. 6% of games in college football, less games, land on 3 than in the NFL. And you can make the narrative as to why the kickers stink. So there's not going to be a lot of, for example, the BYU Baylor game. That game should have landed 3 different times, and it didn't. So I'm a little more comfortable laying 3.5 is kind of my point here. So don't be afraid of the 3 in the hook because obviously you'd rather have 3, but much fewer games in college football land 3 than do in the NFL. So you can feel a little bit more comfortable laying the 3 in the hook. The final point about Oregon's defense, and we talk about this too with injuries long term. Game 1, after you lose a big chunk of one position group, in this case, it's BYU's wide receivers, you kind of make up for it because you can scheme and plot and do different things. Then the long haul with BYU without their two best receivers, you're going to see that production dip. And I think that's what we're going to see this week with that BYU offensive group. So I'm definitely going to get to the window on Oregon, 3 in the hook. I don't think it's going to get to 3. In fact, I would imagine it goes the other way. 3.5, probably the best number you're going to find. And I think that's a solid bet this week. And I full endorse play of the week. Love it. All in.
As of now, though, 62 or 63% of the bets are on BYU. All of a sudden, because of the higher ranked team, and it's crazy.
And the number hasn't moved towards 3, which tells you everything you need to know.
and the interesting part about this is, and not that this necessarily matters when it comes to spreads, but Oregon was the 11th ranked team in the nation prior to their first game. They literally fell out of the top 25 rankings after their loss to Georgia, and then now creep back in right at 25 in the AP poll. So there is a sense that because public bettors will look at the little number next to the team name and go, oh, well, the 9th ranked team versus 25th ranked team.
The number matters very little. That number, if anything, gives you inclination on the other way. For example, the Washington game this week against Michigan State. Go look at who's favored in that game and then go look at who has a number next to their name. Right. It doesn't mean anything.
Why is a lower ranked team favored against a higher ranked team?
Yeah. Unranked team, not even lower, unranked.
Well, in your case, yes. Yeah, in your case, yeah.
Yeah.
Oregon and BYU. Anyway, that'll bring us to our plays of the day. Let's Bet It is presented by Superbook Sports. Go to superbook.com or download the app today, folks. And this season, we're all rooting for safeties. That's because Superbook will give you a $50 bonus on each safety scored this season. Just place a $100 pregame bet on any spread or total. And if there's a safety scored in any game on Sunday, any game, not the one you bet on, any game, you get a $50 bonus. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Jared, what do we have up on the Pickswise.com website for plays of the day for today?
Let's hit a quick refresh here. See if we got some baseball on the site today. Matt Weisenfeld, Wise Guys hanging out. Royals Twins on the money line. I'll let you go check that one out. And then a ton of college football on the site this week. Chris Occasion's got a couple picks. Zeno, you put your pick up there too. Sam Avallone's got a pick, SMU Maryland. So a lot of action. And, of course, I'm going to get to Clev TA's pick for Thursday Night Football in just a moment. We are piggybacking on his 3-star play. But there is some very delicious fodder for you to chew on Pickswise.com today.
All right, that'll bring us to our best bets. I will tee it up to you, my friend, to get us going.
I appreciate that. Again, this is a spot that our buddy Clev TA likes, and he's been doing a fantastic job for us handicapping Thursday night, Monday Night Football so far this season. He is on the first half under today, and I love this spot because everyone's betting the over, and why not? You saw what Patrick Mahomes did to the Cardinals over the weekend, and everyone loves Justin Herbert, and they've got a ton of weapons, but they're going to be without one of those weapons, Keenan Allen, and that obviously is a very important injury. We mentioned the Harrison Butker injury as well. I would say those shave off, maybe not a full point, but maybe a half a point on this total. And when you look at this matchup in the past, it has been a tale of two halves. 3 games between Herbert and Mahomes. All 3 have gone under the first half total in this particular case, 17, 24, and 20 points. And the reason that Clev TA likes the first half under, not the full game under, and this makes perfect sense, the 3 games in the second half have been absolutely bonkers. Fourth quarter and overtime of those 3 games, a combined 89 points, 17, 37, and 35. So I like the idea of ignoring all of the second half randomness and just focusing in on the first half. I like this Chargers defense. I think they're improved. I think we saw that last week, 30% sack rate. They held Derek Carr to a negative EPA per play. And again, I do think that defense has taken a step forward. We'll see what the matchups look like. This is a game that we've seen in the past. The matchups are relatively the same based off of what, Brandon Staley wants to do. And I think we're going to see, hopefully, some regression with this Chiefs offense after exploding in week 1. So it's a sweaty pick. I'm sure after Patty Ice goes 10 for 10 on the first drive and, slices and dices his way down the field and 6-1 in the end zone, I'll be sweating this one. But we are going first half under 27 laying 10 cents. I got it at Superbook. I'm sure there's a couple of other spots that offer it because it looks like the total continues to be in that 54 range across the board.
I'll go to Thursday Night Football as well for my play of the day. Patrick Mahomes, over 26.5 completions. His last 3 meetings against Kansas City, he's all exceeded this number in all 3 of them. He had 30 completions in week 1 as well. His average for his career at home is just about 26 completions when he plays games at Arrowhead. I expect that this, while it can still go under, this should be a 28-24 kind of final. You're going to push the limits of that 54, but there will be a lot of passing here. Andy Reid will use running backs as well. That should give me a couple of high percentage completion passes in the game. So I'm going to give Patrick Mahomes a run here, over 26.5 completions in Thursday Night Football as my play of the day. Jared, final thoughts before we sign off on this Thursday.
I would say final thoughts. Week 2 is an overreaction week. We'll talk about it again tomorrow and Sunday, but don't read too much into what you saw in week 1. If anything, the opposite will take place this week, and be mindful of where these lines are moving. Because we're going to see a lot of movement, I think, over the next 48 hours, especially now that injury news is going to start to come fast and furious. Just be very flexible and nimble with your handicaps, because everything, be prepared to be disenchanted very quickly when you see an injury news or you see something pop up, because I'll be honest, this is a very tough week to bet on the NFL. Overreaction week is in full effect, my friends.
Well, that'll do it for us today here on Let's Bet It, presented by Superbook Sports. I'm Mark Zinno. He's Jared Smith. We'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern. Make sure you subscribe to our Pickswise YouTube channel. Download the Pickswise app on Apple Store and Google Play. For Jared Smith, I'm Mark Zinno. Have a wonderful Thursday. Make sure you guys go get it. Go bet it. Have a great day.